In this video, I'm going to show you 6 tricks that people use to spread misinformation online and explain how you can avoid falling for them. This process is sometimes called inoculation or pre-bunking. The first trick is outrage. This is when a post is designed to make you angry, frightened, disgusted, or morally certain before you've had the chance to check whether it's true. The problem is that outrage is not evidence. It's probably just a signal that something matters to you. Research on social media suggests that moral, emotional language can spread especially well online. So how do you defeat the outrage trick, or at least reduce its grip on you? Well, when a post makes you angry, treat the emotion as a warning. You shouldn't assume that you're dealing with misinformation just because something makes you angry, but you shouldn't let your anger be the reason you share that information. Ask yourself, do I know this is true, or do I just feel it should be true? Then check an independent source, or better still, check a source that wouldn't directly benefit from the claim being true. The second trick is the sounds deep trick. This is when misinformation sounds impressive on the surface because it's difficult to unpack. And you think to yourself, I'm not completely sure what that means, but it sounds important. That reaction is not stupid. In fact, it comes from a good place. You shouldn't dismiss something just because you don't understand it. But misinformation can exploit that intellectual humility. People can be more likely to accept weak claims if they feel impressive or hard to challenge. One way to avoid falling foul of the sounds deep trick is to use the plain language test. Ask, can I restate this claim in a simple and straightforward manner? If the claim becomes clearer when translated and is supported by evidence, that's a good sign. But if the claim evaporates when you translate it, chances are you haven't found something profound. It's probably bullshit. The third trick is the familiarity trick. This one is subtle and often doesn't feel like deliberate manipulation. You see a claim and at first you don't pay much attention to it. But then you see it again on another account. Then someone mentions it in a comment. Then other videos start referring to it as if everyone already knows it. Until eventually you think to yourself, hang on, I've heard this loads of times. There must be something to it. This trick works because familiarity can feel like truth. Repeated claims become easier to process, and that increased processing fluency can often get mistaken for accuracy. Psychologists refer to this as the illusory truth effect. So how do you defeat the familiarity trick? Well, you separate repetition from evidence. Ask, have I seen evidence for this? Or have I just seen it many times? One practical approach is to look for the earliest reliable source that you can find. Where did the information actually come from? Are people just referring to the same original post? Or is there independent evidence from different sources? Because 1,000 reposts of the same unsupported claim do not become 1,000 pieces of evidence. It's still just one unsupported claim that happens to have a very big echo. The fourth trick is the my side trick. This is when a post doesn't just give you information, it gives you a role. It does this by appealing to your identity, your values and group loyalties, so you're more likely to accept information uncritically or interpret it positively. Research on identity and belief suggests that group loyalties can affect how people evaluate information. So how do you defeat the my side trick? Well, the response is to notice when a post is trying to use your identity as a shortcut around your judgment. A good test is to ask yourself if you would apply the same standard of evidence to a piece of information that happened to support your perspective, if instead it undermined your perspective. If the answer is no, then the chances are you're not really properly evaluating that information. You're defending your own team. The fifth trick is the cherry-picking trick. This is when a post selects a very limited range of data, one graph, one study, one anecdote, and presents it as if it settles the whole issue. The misleading post doesn't always involve the fabrication of evidence. Sometimes it can show you something true, but strip away the context you need to fully understand it. Cherry-picking often involves reporting part of the truth in a way that leaves people with a misleading impression. Research indicates that people may judge cherry-picked news less harshly than news containing outright falsehoods, even when the cherry-picked news is more misleading in its consequences. So, how do you defeat the cherry-picking trick? Ask, what impression is this information trying to create? And would that impression survive when exposed to the full context? For example, for a scientific claim, ask whether there's a systematic review or meta-analysis or expert consensus rather than a single study. For a statistic, ask what the base rate is. 10 cases sounds very different depending on whether it's 10 out of 20, 10 out of 10,000, or 10 out of 10 million. Ask what's missing. What would I need to know to interpret this information properly? The 6th trick is the conspiracy trick. This is when a claim protects itself from being tested. It says things like, anyone who questions this has been bought. This trick works because it essentially turns any objection into more evidence for the claim being made. Healthy skepticism asks for evidence. Conspiracy thinking builds a wall around the belief so the evidence can't get in. Research on the continued influence of misinformation suggests that false information can continue to shape people's beliefs even after it's been corrected. So how do you defeat the conspiracy trick? Well, you ask what would refute the claim being made. Ask what evidence would show this claim is wrong. If there is no possible answer, you're not dealing with healthy skepticism anymore. You're dealing with a belief that's been made unfalsifiable. The advice certainly isn't trust authority blindly. The advice is be careful with claims that make themselves impossible to refute. Misinformation isn't going anywhere anytime soon. The details will change, but the tricks used to peddle it will likely remain the same. And knowing about the tricks used to peddle misinformation is the first step towards not falling for them. Be good to yourselves and each other, and I'll see you in the next video.